Well, thank you for joining me. I'm Tom Loucks. It's our council preview program. I'm the Communications Director of the City of Marshfield. And as always, I'm sitting with our City Administrator Steve Barg. Thank you for coming.
Good to be here, Tom, on this beautiful November day.
Yes, it is. It makes you want to take off. But we can't do that at this point because we have a lot of items that are happening, a lot of things going on towards the end of this year. And one of those are budget. And we're still talking about it. And we have a budget meeting, a third one. Is that correct?
That's correct. No, this will be the fourth.
Fourth, really? That's right. It is our fourth. And that is going to be this Monday. And we'll see where it goes. Let's hear what's going to be on that agenda.
Well, you know, Tom, this is the fourth meeting we've had, and I've been here for 10 years now, and this is the first time we've gotten to meeting number 4. Oftentimes we've been able to wrap up the budget in 2 meetings, some years 3, but this is a very challenging year. I think we talked about it before with some of the structural budget issues that we're facing right now. And, you know, one of the things that came up in the third meeting that I'm sure will continue to be discussed is it's really not as much of an expenditure problem. I know that the council is looking for cuts, and I understand why. I totally get it and not disagreeing with that. But just so the public knows, the first budget we presented had a 0.4% increase in expenses. That's pretty low. I mean, that's under inflation, certainly. And now with the cuts that staff proposed last week, we're down to a $0 increase. So in other words, the same dollar amount we would spend in 2021 is what we were budgeted for in 2020. But still, because of some of the things going on, we're losing some revenue from Madison in state transportation aid. Assessed value is kind of flat. And we've got these outstanding debt and other issues we're dealing with. It's making it hard. So what the council asked us to do, and this is really the starting point for the meeting, Tom, is could the city come up with $160,000 in cuts? Now you say, where did 160 come from? It's kind of a weird number. We were talking about the $80,000 that are in there for staff pay raises, the step increases. And I think the council really seems to want to continue that, but they want to be able to show that we're saving money for the public, and I think that makes good sense. So they've been asking staff to see if we can't find some cuts totaling $120,000. I'm working on that right now with our department heads, and it's pretty challenging. Even in a budget of $22 million, we've cut a lot already, but we'll bring back to them our best proposal. Some of the things will probably be items, I'm guessing, that might have an impact on our citizens in terms of the level of services you see. And we're not trying to make that happen, but there's a point where, when you cut enough, that's where you end up. But we'll see. We're doing our best right now, and we'll definitely try to show the council and the mayor that we've come up with a quality proposal, maybe more than one proposal for them to consider.
Okay. So your job, as well as department heads, are to find $160,000. Is that, and don't worry about the step increases, correct? Just find $160,000. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, they've said that the step increases are not in that the step increases, were put in the budget. They continue to be there. I think the marker is there that if we can't find savings, then they're going to have to discuss a lot of things, probably including step increases. But we're seeing what we'll come up with, and we'll bring it to them. That really will be the starting point of the meeting. Some of the other meetings, Tom, have had a lot of prelude before you get into the discussion. It's going to pretty well start out with staff's proposal or multiple options, followed by nothing but council discussion, and we really want to resolve it. The tax bills are supposed to go out by around December 15th, and we need to get the council to approve sending a budget to public hearing on Monday so we can have it, right after Thanksgiving, to allow 2 weeks to do the tax bill preparation and get those out to our citizens.
Okay, so there is a sense of urgency.
There is.
You do have to allow 2 weeks, you said, for a public hearing. Is that correct?
15 days so if we put it in the paper on Saturday, what would that be, the 14th, then we could have the public hearing right at the end of November, and then that would give us 2 weeks after that to prepare the tax bills.
Okay. Public hearing, why have a public hearing? What's that about?
Well, we have one every year. It's required by state law, and it's that one last chance to make changes before a budget is formally adopted. Now, the public can come to that meeting, and if you're tuned in right now and you're following this and you're saying, look, I hear there's a tax increase, I hear that some of the things I wanted to see aren't in there, you can still come on that date at the end of November, and the council could modify the budget right on the spot. They could make a motion at the end of the meeting. I propose that we approve the budget with the following 3 changes that were brought up tonight by our citizens. So it's never too late, but usually by the time we get to the public hearing, everything's been worked through and hopefully close to being ready to adopt.
Okay. Although if you're a citizen and you want to attend this meeting on Monday, 6 p.m. council chambers. Is there going to be public comment? Can they say something about that now?
There is. And if you've been following this and you want to make a comment, or if you haven't been following this and you want to come to the podium, Tom, and say, you know what, I don't think you've been spending enough to keep up our parks. Or can't you keep the tax rate lower? I'm on a fixed income, or whatever it is. You feel free to do that, or feel free to email or call us, and we'll let that be known to the council.
Okay. One last thing, really hasn't to do with us, but we do collect the tax. Again, the elections are not official as of today. We're taping this on a Thursday, just 2 days after election. But the school board, I believe it was a yes on the referendum. That means there is going to be a raise on their end that has not to do with our city, correct? Just so we understand it. Correct. They will get a tax bill. It's going to go up because of that, but that has nothing to do with city, even though we collect it, just so we know.
You know, Tom, I'm glad you're saying this. Even normally without the referendum on the school side, the city is responsible for 37% of your tax bill. So when you see your tax bill, if it's gone up, you know, the city may well be a good part of it. I don't know. But make sure that you look at your bill, because you have the city, the school, the county, the tech college. They're all part of it. And sometimes, you know, one might be a 0 increase and another might be a 5% increase. You want to make sure you know where the money's going. And that way you can funnel your concerns to the right people.
Once those numbers are actually figured out, is that going to come from us, including all those numbers on a tax bill, or will we know those so we can tell the public before they get their bill?
Well, we'll know before they get their bill. We'll know at the point that we're preparing them, and so we'll probably do some publicity with your help, and maybe, you know, in this program too, and through our different platforms, to show people you're going to see a tax rate increase of whatever it is, X, and here's what went into it. One group went up, one group went down, so they can see the numbers that came from the various taxing entities.
Yeah, just a little bit of insight. Not just from our standpoint, just so because they get a bill and it comes really from us. We're the collector. We divvy it up just to help the citizens of Marshfield. All right.
I've worked in cities before where people just come to the city and start yelling, and I'm not being funny, but then I've been able to point at and say, look, the city didn't go up at all, really, hardly, and here's who did go up. And I think most of the time people get it. They just look at the bottom line. You know, I look at the bottom line sometimes on bills, but yeah, I'd encourage you to look at the line that says City of Marshfield.
Sounds good, Steve. Thank you. And again, 6 p.m. on Monday. That's November 9th. And it is open to the public, and we'll see what happens.
Yep.
All right. Good. And then the next day right after is our usual council meeting, first of the month. We've got some things on here to talk about. New business, some in consent. Let's talk about one thing before we even get to consent. Last council meeting, we had some public comment about the cemetery. Is something going to be addressed, I believe, on staff updates at that time?
Yeah, Tom, it is. And I think a lot of people have been upset about this. What happened was the cemetery, we have Hillside Cemetery, which is the city's, and then connected with it, if you will, the Catholic and Lutheran cemeteries. They're all maintained by the city of Marshfield. Now, we work with the proper people in the Catholic and Lutheran churches to make sure that we're all in sync about what we're doing. So they were advised of it. And, you know, we did some publicity to try and get the word out that we were going to do the sweep of the cemetery as far as stuff leave around the gravesite. You know, people leave different items that they want to remember their loved ones with. And, you know, these rules have been in place for a long time, but they weren't actively enforced. So, but despite some of our publicity, a lot of people were pretty unhappy to find out that the stuff they put out there around their loved ones' grave sites had been picked up. Where did it go? And so we've stored a lot of it. Much of it has been recovered by people. They've come in and looked at it. They said, "Oh, that's my shepherd's hook," or "That's my, whatever it is that I put out before." But there's still people who are still a little frustrated about it. And what we want to do is kind of talk through a little bit what happened, what did we do to try and publicize this, and how have we dealt with the complaints that have come up, how have we gotten the property back to people as best we can, and then finally, what could we do better? I think it's always good to debrief to find out what you might have done not perfectly, but then does it lead to action in the future? And I want to make sure that we're doing that. I can tell you this, though, from talking to several people involved in this from the city's Park and Recreation Department, that they're quality people. They're trying to do what's right. I think they feel like they did as best they could. They may have learned a couple things along the way, but they're outstanding employees, and we just want to try and keep working through the remaining issues and prepare for 2021 and beyond.
Okay. So learn from the experience and get better is what you're telling me, and also just kind of state what was done so people are aware of what was done.
Right, and if you're still not happy, feel free to give me a call, or you can call the Park and Recreation Director, Justin Casperson. We want to hear your concerns, but like I said, a lot of the property has been returned. People have come and picked it up, and that doesn't mean they're thrilled with the policy, but really, there's also people out there who I assume are happy with the sweep we made, because sometimes, even as much as we want to honor loved ones, sometimes things get a little bit to be much as far as the storage of items and being set around on the grounds. And so hopefully people will understand, they'll give us some grace, and we'll try to do the best job of PR going forward.
Okay. I'm curious, maybe our viewers are, is the cemetery, who's that owned by? Is it owned by us, the city? Not a usual thing in a city, is that right? Or is it?
Well, it's kind of hit and miss. It's really weird because it's really 3 cemeteries in one. The portion that we talk about a lot is Hillside Cemetery. The city has a part in this, a big part. But then adjoining to it are the Catholic and Lutheran cemeteries. We maintain it for them. We have a maintenance agreement. They pay us to do the mowing and snow plowing and things like that. So we manage part of it for them, and we own the other part.
I got it. Okay, well that helps. I get to understand that, not originally from being here, but I've always kind of wondered that, and maybe others did as well. All right, well just let anybody know, we are wearing masks. We're about probably almost 10 feet from each other. Just want to let you know that. We don't wear masks because sometimes the audio just gets very muffled. So we want you guys to hear it the best you can, and we are definitely taking precautions, both Steve and I, in this room. So just want to let the people know that. Anyway, let's talk about our street superintendent, not the main one, not Chris, but there's our assistant. He's retiring, I hear.
Yeah, Kurt Bornbach. The structure of our street department, Tom, we have a superintendent, and then we have 2 assistants. And Kurt Bornbach is an assistant. He's been with the city for 34 years. What an outstanding employee. Think of the service he's put in and all the things he's seen change in the world of the street division since like 1986 or something. But he is retiring, and we wish him all the best. He'll be stepping aside before the end of the year. And so we need to replace that position. So Chris Hawley came up. He's looking for authorization to appoint somebody. And there might be people thinking, well, no, wait a minute. Is everybody from the outside world going to get a fair chance? We look for people from the outside world for our positions. In this case, it's likely to be somebody from within who knows the system, who's been coming up the ranks. But truthfully, if that happens, then down the road, at some point, there'll be a new hire to city employment, most likely, if the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee approves, and there'll be someone coming on to the city as a new staff person. But for right now, we're looking to fill the position of Kurt, to get someone working with Chris Hawley and others at the top level of management. And our street division does a great job. They're getting ready now for the great winter of snow plowing, and I hope it's not too bad a winter. But anyway, the committee was favorable, and this will now hopefully be approved by the council under the consent agenda.
Okay, so it went through finance on Tuesday night. They agreed to have it be appointed, which would be within the staff, correct? That would leave a vacancy somewhere in the street department, but that would have to go back to finance no matter what, whoever that is. Correct. And then they can determine if they're going to fill that or not. And but the street superintendent is doing a lot of things such as scheduling, making sure things are operating. Maybe even have to sometimes jump in the truck. You do see it's Kurt. He's out there in his work boots. You see it quite a bit.
Yep. He is. He was doing a great job on site in those projects. And taking off on what you just said, Tom, the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee now, as of October, is going to review every position before we refill it. And some people at home might be wondering, the city talks about their tight finances. Do they look at personnel, or do they just automatically, rehire when someone leaves? And we always look at it, but now it's even going to be more intentional than that to make sure that there's not another way to do things. Maybe there's a way to combine 2 positions into one, or something more creative than just rehiring. So, when this comes back, it will be scrutinized by that committee as to whether or not we need to jump in and refill.
Although that's another layer in the process. Technically, the department head could say no and it never gets there, right? Is that true? If they
True.
feel it,
No, true.
and that's a savings, which nothing wrong with that.
No.
But there is some, I don't want to say gates, but a really good process to make sure it's vetted correctly.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I think, and it's important for, I think, our elected officials right now, they feel, to be able to tell the public that, you know, when openings come up, we do review them. We do review whether or not we need to refill them. And I think the lion's share of the time the answer is yes. I mean, we have good people doing outstanding work, and when they leave, there's a void. But there may be some circumstances. There may well be where there's other creative ways to address vacancies.
All right. Well, let's keep going on our consent agenda. A lot of times those are, while they are very important, now every item is very important.
Right.
But MEW, I'm not going to try to know that acronym, excuse me.
Yeah.
What is it? If people want to know more about it, I know it's like a compliance way to learn from outside safety measures. I'll have you talk about it.
Yeah, you know, MEUW, when I look at it, I think of the word meow. I guess meow is MEOW, but these folks do a great job. We have contracted with them for the last couple of years to do our safety training. So they will go out in the field, they'll look at the processes that are being used. Is the equipment up to speed? You know, are there opportunities to have a safer environment for our workforce? You know, there's a lot of money spent by most communities on workers' comp, and you know, it really hurts us when people are off work for a long time. You know, how do we deal with it? So we want to minimize injuries. We want to minimize those kind of situations. So they do a lot of work for us. They report to our HR director, Jennifer Rakew, and let her know if there's things we ought to be looking at buying or doing more training to try and minimize accidents. And so what we have right now, Tom, is they're not, I mean, the contract goes on as long as we want it to go on, but they are looking to amend the fees slightly, you know, inflation, and bump them up slightly. And so that's an addendum to the contract that would need to be approved, and the committee was favorable to that. It's basically an inflationary adjustment, and but we want to continue with them if possible, because if we didn't have them, we'd have to do all the safety work, you know, training and management ourselves, and that's a pretty specialized world. You know, really think of how often the laws are changing with OSHA and you know, all the things that come down from the federal and state government.
Yes, definitely, and it's workplace safety is very important. You don't have workers, our services can't be done. But as a business owner, I think even Jen, I know Jen, and even you get injuries, your workers' comp goes up.
Yeah.
And if that goes up, you might as well have had the training. Anyways.
Not to mention, you really want to avoid that terrible accident too. I mean, think about how bad a city feels. Supervisors, everybody, if there's an accident where someone is badly injured by a piece of equipment, and you look back and you say, that could have been avoided. You don't want to be there. Nobody wants to be there. It's devastating to a family. It's devastating to the workforce and the people who work closely with that person. So we want to provide the best safe environment, and people who are professionals, who know all the latest laws and practices, that's who you want.
All right. Well, I want to bring up the contract for city attorney. That's also on here. HAP is what we refer to him as. I don't. What is his first name? Harold, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And he is part of a company, I believe. His last name's Wolfgram. What does that mean?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny because the city has a city attorney, and yet we still periodically go out for proposals, the same way we do for auditors and assessors and stuff. So, you know, 3 years ago, the city decided to look for proposals, and they got 2 proposals. One from Wolfgram, Gamoki, and Hutchinson, the firm you just mentioned, they're in town here, and one from a bigger firm from out of town. And they looked at the 2, and the bigger firm was a lot more expensive, and it looked like they probably wouldn't necessarily provide that much better service than we get here from Harold Wolfgram, or HAP as you mentioned. So they decided to stay with Wolfgram. So this year I came back to him and I said, well, you know, it's been 3 years. You don't have to bid it out again. You can if you want to. What do you think? And they said, no, let's not bid it out again. Let's just negotiate something with Mr. Wolfgram and continue on with him. So, you know, in a couple of years from now, they may decide they want to look for proposals again from other firms. But they did agree to a request from him for a slight increase in his hourly rate. But he does a great job for the city. I can't tell you how many times I call HAP, as we call him, HAP Wolfram, and talk about issues that are just really difficult. They're challenging. If the city makes a mistake, it could be costly. And so the committee was favorable. I'm hopeful that the council will be. He works right here in town. He's a block away from City Hall, and but we'll see what they want to do.
All right. Well, let's move on to consent agenda. Usually that goes pretty fast. We actually spend quite a bit of time on it. But these are items that you pull out because there is recommended action as well. Taxi ride. Again, we have our own taxi service, not owned by the city. We pay somebody to do this. Is that right?
Yeah, people think it's our taxi service, and sometimes they complain and they'll say, your taxi isn't running very well. We don't have a city taxi. There's no city employees out there. We're the middleman, so to speak. So here's the way it works. The federal government and the state government provide grants to run for local cities and villages to run shared ride taxi services. And by shared ride, we mean that more than one person in the car. So if they're driving to pick you up, on the way they might stop and pick me up. Anyway, the three funding mechanisms, the grants cover a lot of the cost, the fares that people pay when they ride cover another big chunk, but there's usually another piece, Tom, that is not covered, and we call it a local share. And the cities like to keep their local share as small as possible. I mean, we want to get a taxi service that's basically covered by user fees, the fares, and the grants. But you might have $10,000, $15,000 at the end of the year, whatever it is that's not covered, and the city pays for that. It's important to our community. You know, I often say that the number of people who use the taxi service is not large, you know, broadly speaking, but it's so important to their lives. People who are seniors, maybe they have some medical conditions, they're disabled, and they can get to doctor's appointments, they can get groceries, all the things that would be very difficult to get without a taxi service. So anyway, what's happening here is that in the last few years, we've had situations where we've had more money spent maybe than we expected to spend from the city coffers, and we need to make a transfer of funds from the general fund to the appropriate fund to sort of rectify that. And the council might have some questions. I think the Finance, Budget, and Personnel Committee had a few. The other thing that comes from that, though, and I have to say this to our viewers, we may need to look at revenue more broadly in the future. Is it time to bump up the fares a little bit? Well, we don't like to do that. We don't like to do that because, again, a lot of the people who use the taxi service are on fixed incomes, but at some point you have to look at least an increase periodically. Otherwise, the taxpayers are funding a bigger part of it through their local share. So you may hear in 2021 some discussion about fares, looking at other cities. Are we comparable? Right now we're at $2.85 for a ride for people who fit into that category of seniors or those with disabilities. I think the regular fare is, I'm not sure, is it $4 and something. But it's worthwhile to review it periodically to make sure that we're charging what we need to charge in order to make things work. And so this is just transferring funds.
What else? I have ethics board on here. That's a biggie.
It is. You know, Ed Wagner has been working on this for, I think, 4 months now. He's really looking to have an ethics board to hear, I'll say cases. You know, I don't mean to make them sound like legal cases, but it's got a twofold purpose, Tom. The first one is if they believe that as an elected official or maybe a committee member or somebody has perhaps violated ethical standards, maybe they've participated in a discussion and vote that they really shouldn't have, maybe based upon, you know, some family ties to a business or whatever, then they look at it and they make a decision of sorts as to whether they believe there was an ethical violation, and then, you know, what should come from that. The other thing, though, is let's say Steve Barg is thinking about something, and I can just go to this board and say, you know what, here's what's going on. My brother-in-law works for, you know, rail transport or whatever, and they're coming up before the Plan Commission, and, you know, I might be involved in making a recommendation for this. Would that be a conflict of interest? And they'll actually give you a proactive ruling. They'll look at it and they'll get back to you and say, you know what, you're fine, Steve. You know, there's enough separation between you and what's going on here to where you don't need to worry. Or they might say, yeah, stay away from that. Do not get involved in that. You could be seen as having an ethical problem there. So both on the aspect of looking at it after the fact to see if there was something not appropriate, or trying to head off problems by answering questions. That's what that board would do.
One last item. It has to do with the department that I run and work in, communications plan. It's our second reading. And Steve, what does that mean?
Well, why don't I kind of turn it on you for a second?
Okay.
You presented at the first meeting, and
yep.
You got some feedback. I mean, you're doing a great job, Tom, of really trying to, again, help us to be more consistent, more proactive, do a better job of messaging. and using all of our various platforms. You got some feedback. I know a couple people were talking about that idea of getting out there on more platforms aggressively. I know Tom Witzel is a big proponent of that. Where do you see it right now, and where do you see it going as we head toward final approval, hopefully?
So far, all very positive of what I've seen and I've heard actually too. The whole thing is a way to get the process going and be very proactive, like you say, Steve. Look at these projects before they start, so we can tell people along the way, not just tell them once. They may need to be reminded. They might need information along the way. It could be a 3-year process. We don't know, but you don't know until you see the actual project that's at hand, and that's even before it may even get to council, because that may help council better understand it as well, or even staff better understand it. So my job is to communicate that in a way people understand it on different platforms.